Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What's going on, buddy? Thank you so much for bearing with me on that cringy intro. Today we're going to be ranking all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies today, including the brand new Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg produced Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, a film that I got to see about 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've gone through and revisited every single Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, even including some of the non-theatrical ones, such as Turtles Forever, the freaking Batman vs. the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which premiered on Netflix. So I'm very excited to dive into this because I have been just a Turtles fan since about first grade. And I remember in first grade, I'm going to get a little bit sappy, a little bit backstory a little bit for a second. My friend, I went over to my friend's house, I remember he introduced me to the 2003 Ninja Turtles show. He had some of the old school toys from the original cartoon, but he introduced me to the show through playing a video game. And I was like, this is really cool. And he's like, this is a show. It's based on a show. And he then ended up showing me the show, and we blasted through so many of the episodes of the 2003 iteration of the Ninja Turtles. And that iteration was like everything to me at one point. And then I went back and revisited everything I possibly could. And as a kid, I loved the Ninja Turtles. I have a deep love for them in so many different ways. And I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you're watching this, probably also have the same thing because there's so many different iterations of the Turtles. I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on which version got you into it. I also definitely want to hear what your ranking is of all 10 films that I'm about to rank. So make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Hit that like, subscribe button for more. And of course, without further ado, let's get into this ranking. Coming down at my number 10, kicking off this list is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first reboot that Michael Bay had produced. This movie is not great. It's not good. It's not even fine. This movie's very lackluster. Very boring. But, you know, I am a positive person. I like to talk about the pros, and one thing I will say is that when you actually have the turtles interacting, that is the best part about this entire film. In fact, like that whole elevator sequence when they're just singing there, dancing for a second, I was really into that, and I like that scene, and there's little glimmers of hope throughout this movie. What I mean by that is that I really love the Turtles' banter. I like how the Turtles talk with one another. I like how they fight with one another. The action scenes are cool. Shredder looks like Megatron had a baby with Freddy Krueger, so I wasn't a big fan of that, but everything when it comes back to the Turtles, I like. I like how they fight. I like how the action is. I like the brotherly bond between them. It's not super strong in this one because I just don't think we get enough of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They really pull the Transformers in this film where it was more about the humans than the turtles. You have this character named Vern, played by Will Arnett. You have April O'Neil, played by Megan Fox. So I thought Megan Fox actually did a decent job as April. But again, it's too much of them, less of the Turtles, more of this whole Shredder thing, and the Foot Ninjas, like, they don't even have, they just look like normal generic soldiers. There's a lot of just generic aspects to this, and it's a very forgettable film in the end of the day. And the last thing I do want to say is that out of all the Turtle movies, and out of everything I'm going to talk about today, this iteration feels more not teenage, but more like adult versions of the Turtles. So I'm not a huge fan of this one. It's an absolute waste of time, and for me, I'm very happy because, as you can tell, the second film was a lot better. Because coming down on my number 9 is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. This is that original trilogy's finale where the Turtles get the time travel back. And I'm going to be honest, I actually watched this for the first time this past week because I had never seen this one. Out of all those original trilogies, this is the one that I just never visited. I thought it was dumb with them traveling back in time as a kid. And, you know, coming back now, this was the one I was kind of putting off last, and it was the final one that I watched. And it's cute. I liked it. It's not great. I actually think it's very forgettable. I think that's the big element of it. The villain is very forgettable. The entire story of them actually in this time-traveled area have some cool moments, but again, it's just forgettable. Like the fact that I watched it yesterday and can barely tell you what had happened in it, I think is a major issue. When there's countless other Ninja Turtles films that I watched about 6 days ago, and they're not blurring together. I can actually differentiate them. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 continues the charm of what the first two have. And that charm is the reason that I would even go anywhere near like a positivity. And it actually is the reason that this one is above the last film I just discussed. Simply because I love these iterations of the Turtles. I love their values, I love how they discuss, and I really love how this world kind of brought them in and took them in. I wish Casey Jones had a little bit more to do in here. You know, it sucked that he didn't come back for the second one. I wanted him to come back into the third one. He came back, and he's just not really in there enough. His whole subplot's kind of a waste. Splinter's subplot is a waste. I wish they actually would have brought that entire team into that time-traveled area. But other than that, this one, cool action, fun moments, but overall a very forgettable story, which shouldn't be because it's a time-traveling story with the Ninja Turtle. Now coming down to my number 8, this one actually might be a lot higher for some of you guys watching this, but this is Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. This is, from what I understand, the finale, technically, to the original Nickelodeon show, which I never watched that iteration. That is the only iteration of the Turtles that I've never watched. And so this being my first glimpse into that, the biggest thing I can come away saying is that I enjoyed it. I thought it was actually pretty cool, and the biggest solid thing about it all is the animation. The animation is absolutely incredible, and absolutely out of all the animated films on this, bar one of them that I'm going to talk about, this is the best animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on an animation scale. Like, I was just sitting there, like, completely, like, wow, I love 2D animation. I love how they're creating this, and I love how the powers of the Turtles are working. Now, some of that I just don't really jive with. I don't really like that they gave powers to the Ninja Turtles. I don't really love the sci-fi scenario. I did at first, but the way that they kind of tie it into the rest of the story just doesn't really work with me. I don't really like the design of Krang, to be honest. There's just little things and little moments that I wish we had more of, or less of as well. And I think if you would have had this style of animation, but a little bit of a different outcome to certain things, I would have liked this one a little bit more. I feel like if I was actually into the show, which I do plan to actually go back and rewatch every single one of the iterations of the Turtles, so I am interested to see this iteration of them, I feel like I would be a little bit more into the story of this all. I found just watching it on that, the story kind of felt a little bit surface level. It wasn't fully there for me. The character development didn't really make sense for certain characters. Not sure where I was at within the story at all. This is a solid time and a solid Turtle watch, and it gets better as it goes on. But this is one that was made purely for fans of that iteration of the show, and for me, it's not as high up on my list as I wanted it to be. Now, coming down at my number 7 is Batman versus the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Now, with every versus, you would absolutely assume that they're going to fight for a second, but then they're probably going to come together, and that's exactly how this is in one of those Batman animated spin-off films. And this one's cool. I remember I watched this one, like, a long time ago, like, when it first came out. I thought it was fine. But kind of coming back now after revisiting some of the Turtle comics and just in general being on, like, a Batman comic kick right now, I have to say I thought this film actually brought the essence of some of that original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic books, as well as some earlier Batman comic books that kind of, and even the Batman the Brave and the Bold version of that, and bringing the Ninja Turtles in, seeing how they work together, and seeing how they flesh out one another is, for me, one of the elements that actually made me the happiest. Seeing Batman work with the Ninja Turtles is fun. Seeing the Ninja Turtles fight some of Batman's villains is fun. Seeing Batman's villains turn into mutants that make them even more dangerous is fun. Seeing how Shredder is working with the likes of Joker and Ra's al Ghul, and that's the kick you get out of this. If you're a fan of Batman and the Ninja Turtles, this is why you would like this movie. It's an instant middle-of-the-road film that you can find because that's how the story feels. But when it comes down to the animation and the action, it's fun and it's a blast, and you get some nostalgic moments from that. Other than that, it's a little forgettable, but the memorable moments definitely make it memorable and make it into a midpoint of this ranking. Or at least almost a midpoint of this, because we still have my number 6 to talk about, which let's talk about that now. At my number 6, TMNT. This is, I think, the 2007 animated film. I might be getting that year wrong, but it's the animated film that went into theaters. And I thought the animation as a kid looked like crap, and I still think that 50% of this film, the animation looks like crap. Now, I was actually kind of surprised to see that the other 50% of the animation was actually really damn good, but the CGI animation that they decided to go with here, I don't think was the strongest. But the thing that's actually interesting about my thought process with this one is, as I sat down to watch it, I was not really feeling it. But then after I finished it, while I had my issues with it, I found that the villain was overall pretty lackluster. I walked away and I sat down on it. I thought about it. I like this movie more. I'd give this film a 4 out of 5 stars, which that might be a spoiler for everything else coming up on this list, but I thought this was fairly executed pretty well. And I actually like the idea that the Turtles, they defeated Shredder and now they don't really have a purpose, so they all split up at the start of this film. And that's an interesting way to take the Turtles in my eyes, is to have the Turtles split up on the terms of their own at the start of this film, in a brand new world, a brand new iteration of the Turtles, where we know who the Turtles are. We know how they got their powers. We know all this stuff. We know who Shredder is. And you start us out after that outcome. And I like how this movie, you know, every iteration of the Turtles, I always found that there's two fan bases. It's people who want the Turtles to be more jokey and fun, and there's the iteration that people want the Turtles to be a lot darker. And I found that this film actually brought the mix together. I love both iterations of the Turtles. I like both iterations. I want to see both iterations. But I like that this one kind of merged it a bit, because there is a little bit of a darker tone that feels a little bit more accurate to the original comic books. And I was never really blown away by this movie, but I found that the high points of this film are some of the highest in the TMNT franchise overall. And some of the lows definitely make the film drag out and pacing wise, but when I think back on this movie, I think back on the better aspects of it all. And I think back that, yeah, damn, that was a pretty damn solid, fun time as a Ninja Turtles fan. And seeing like what Raphael's doing is kind of like his version of like a vigilante, and then that fight scene between him and Leonardo is freaking awesome. And even that entire thing when they're storming like in the third act and they're fighting all the different enemies, it's awesome. And I really like the banter between these turtles. You can definitely feel the brotherly bond between them. And seeing them finally come back together, I think was great. And it kind of sucks that we never actually did genuinely get a sequel to this. But that might be my fault, because I was one of those people that looked at it on a surface level and said, that looks like shit, I'm not paying for that. And I probably should have gone to the theaters and seen this one as a kid. My number 5 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Secret of the Ooze. Now, I know a lot of you guys probably have this one a little bit higher up on your list. I didn't fully grow up with this one. I grew up more on the first one after I finally discovered the Ninja Turtles in about 2003, 2004. And I found that The Secret of the Ooze is a pretty damn good time. It's a great little follow-up to the original film. I think it's a little bit surface level when it comes down to its humor and some of its story beats, and specifically bringing back Shredder I do not think was needed. But I really do like how they started to infuse more of the mutants. Now, I was a little bit weirded out that they didn't have Bebop and Rocksteady as the main two mutants, that they decided to use two different characters, which apparently the fans are really big fans of. I don't really even remember their name. They were cool looking. But then I found out and started reading trivia on why they weren't in here is because the original creators did not want them in here. The Bebop and Rocksteady were not creations from the comic books, and they didn't want that. So I guess I can understand that. Those mutants are cool. I liked seeing how they fought and kind of worked alongside. I like how the Foot Clan is kind of like dismembered, and when Shredder comes back, it's kind of like a big surprise. But in the end of the day, the thing that still impresses me with this film, and you're going to hear me reiterate this when we talk about the first 90s TMNT film, is the fact that they can do everything in these suits. And the fact that the suits kind of still hold up to today. The fact that they're doing backflips and fighting with the suits. There's just this whole element that just puts a smile on my face. And I still can't believe the practicality of that, because it takes me back to old school Kung Fu days. And the fact that I find that each and every one of these TMNT 90s trilogy movies can, in a way, bring to life a piece of Hollywood that is drastically missing in today's standards, which is a lot of kung fu films, and instantly bring you back to nostalgia. And while, yes, it is an absolute 90s film because you have Vanilla Ice singing a song, a turtle rapping song, in the third act while they fight, that's as 90s as it can get. I found Secret of the Ooze to be fun. I don't really remember the story all too much, but I do really love, again, the brothers' banter. I actually am in the minority. I actually like this version of April more. I wish Casey Jones was in here, but man, is it a blast. And it's fun. It's a great little follow-up to the first film. Coming down to my number 4 now is Turtles Forever. For people who don't know what this is, I didn't even know what this is. I thought I had actually seen all of the iterations of the 2003 TMNT film, but it seems like they had one more iteration. This is kind of their finale to their entire show, and it brings in the 80s TMNT cartoon. I don't know how I didn't know about this until I started, I think a couple months ago, I started, looking into, what films do I need to rewatch for this ranking. And I noticed this, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I have to include this. And honestly, I wanted to include it a little bit higher, but the reason I didn't is partially because I have not watched the 80s version in years, and for the 2003, it's honestly been quite a minute. So with that being my favorite iteration of the animated TV shows, this was the blast of nostalgia that I wanted. The fact that it brings them both together in a multiverse concept, and the fact that the Turtles Forever did No Way Home before No Way Home was even a thing, and the fact that the Ninja Turtles did do the multiverse thing before even Marvel had started doing it in any of their animation or say movies, it's honestly kind of insane. And Turtles Forever is a blast. It's honestly a love letter to the entire TMNT franchise, specifically even the graphic novels, because there's one point where they teleport and they go to the graphic novel world, which I didn't even know about, and I think that's one of the coolest things. And that's not a spoiler. I mean, that's not a spoiler. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe you didn't want to know that, but I found that awesome. I didn't know anything about this thing going in, and I think for people who are any sort of Turtles fans should watch this. Even if you've never watched the 2003 or the 80s, you'll have some blast of it, because it's, again, a love letter to those two cartoons as well as the graphic novel, and the way that they bring and intersect and make it all work, and how they're fighting the different villains, and how two different Shredders and different Krangs and different Turtles and different Splinters and different pizza worlds and different everything of that nature. I could not stop smiling watching this thing, and I think it's a blast. Is it a little bit long? Yeah. Is the pacing a little bit long? Yeah. Is the story very TV movie-ish? Absolutely, which might make you guys drop this one a lot lower on the list. And just how I mentioned in Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Netflix film, I'm not a fan of that iteration, so I understand why that will be a lot higher for a lot of you guys, and Turtles Forever will probably be a lot lower for some of you guys who didn't grow up with it. But I recommend it. I watched it on YouTube for free as well, just as a heads up. I don't know if that was... It's on there. But Turtles Forever is awesome, and I cannot recommend this one enough. It really brought back a piece of my childhood that I thought was missing, and it literally made me go, okay, yeah, I'm rewatching all of the 2003 TMNT. On my number 3, though, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, and a lot of you guys probably have this one a lot lower on your list. For me, I don't. I think this absolutely is, in terms of a sequel, better than the original in every sort of way. Every single light. There's still a couple things that hold it back, such as the Vern character and some of the human elements, but watching this movie, I am completely baffled that they got away with the visual effects for the Turtles and how good they still look. But the fact that I would say that this movie is all about them. They are not delegated to the side. They are the forefront of this story. And that is awesome to see that a studio actually let the directors do that. And I think this was the perfect amount of April O'Neil. I think it was cool bringing in Casey Jones. I didn't love the iteration, but I thought it was cool. But it's the Turtles that I go back to. And it's the way that they use Bebop and Rocksteady, who I think are awesome villains in this. And the way that they use Shredder. And of course, Krang. Now, my only issue with this, because I did go back and forth that this was going to be my number 2 or my number 3, is there is too many villains in this. They got Baxter Stockman, they got Krang, they got Bebop and Rocksteady, they got Shredder. That's a lot right there. I think they should have pulled it back a bit, maybe done Bebop and Rocksteady and Krang, and maybe not brought back Shredder. I understand why they brought back Shredder, because this was kind of like, hey, we know we messed up in the last film, here's the pros. But then, like, Shredder is delegated to, again, a henchman and is frozen and gone for the entire third act, pretty much. So, I don't even think Shredder should have been in here. With that said, though, Out of the Shadows is awesome. And I know I might be in the high minority on this. I'm replaying all the action sequences through this film. I'm playing how the Turtles interact with one another, how the Turtles fight Bebop and Rocksteady, how they fight Krang, how they all delegate to this all, and how they are in New York City. And, you know, by the end of the film, how they just want the city to accept them. I really love what Out of the Shadows did. And I remember seeing this at like a midnight, like 11:30 screening, because I got out of work late. And just instantly going, this is a blast. And I haven't watched it since then. This is my first time coming back to watch it again a second time. And it still holds up on how much fun it is. I think if you are a Turtles fan, this is a movie that you can appreciate in a lot of different ways. If you're not a Ninja Turtles fan and you watch this, you probably think it's trash. And I would understand, because there is a lot of bad elements to it. It does feel like a Saturday morning cartoon, but in some way, shape, and form, that's kind of what I wanted it to be. At number 2, we have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 90s original movie, which still holds up to today. Yes, it has that 90s flair. Yes, it even feels kind of like an 80s movie specifically, because it was made in the 80s, premiered in the 90s, but god, man, the kung fu action scenes are so well done and so well choreographed. And like I mentioned in Secret of the Ooze, rewatching this first film, I'm sitting there in awe of, like, how are they able to do all these stunts and these big, bulky Ninja Turtle costumes. And it's so much fun. It's so entertaining. The action scenes are very memorable. And that was actually the one thing I was really worried about this not holding up on these movies, was the action set pieces. They hold up. They're fun. They're like old kung fu movies. I love how the foot soldiers look. I love the Shredder in this movie. I love Splinter in this movie. And I love every little ounce of what the Ninja Turtles gave in this. The humor, the kind of like, whoa, dude, cowabunga. I love that. It's very much a product of its time. Still holds up to today. And while there is some, again, rose-tinted glasses and nostalgia on this movie, it just puts an absolute smile on your face when you watch it. And I have no issues. It's an hour and a half. It plays right through it. You have a ton of fun. And you walk away with a smile on your face. You laughed. You had fun. I mean, there's nothing more to say about it. This movie's awesome. I understand that this movie is probably going to be a lot of people's number ones. But my number one is the brand new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Which, when announced, I was like, oh, that's cool that Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are making a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, but I didn't really care. I was kind of over it. I was over the Ninja Turtles on movie format. I didn't want to see another animated film, and I didn't want to see another 3D, and then I saw the trailer, and I was like, whoa, was I wrong? This trailer looks cool. It gave kind of a mid-90s vibe, if you know that film from Jonah Hill. But the thing that actually really took me back was the animation. It was Spider-Verse, but it was different. And getting to attend Comic-Con and finding out that it's pretty much what if teenagers had drawn this entire world in like their third grade class on their little notebooks to the side. I almost cried when I heard that, because that's what I used to do. I used to draw like this stuff in like elementary school and everything. And to see it's like the turtles coming off the page to fight, and you actually have real teenagers playing them, and it feels that bond, because this is easily my favorite brotherly bond between the turtles. I love the voice actors. I love Superfly. I was very surprised by Ice Cube. He definitely is Ice Cube, but it fits Superfly so well. The Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor score of this all is perfection. The soundtrack is amazing. The animation, once again, is spectacular. There's one edited scene so perfectly together, one of the action scenes, when you see all the turtles going through different areas interrogating, but it's all happening seamlessly, and it's stunning. And what I really love about this is that, yes, there's two different versions of the Turtles, like I've mentioned. There's the darker side, and there's a little bit more of the teenage humorous side, and this definitely leans more towards that. But it never takes away from the more darker moments of being who they are, which is where Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, while they had the great idea of the animation, working with, of course, Roe as the director, but they also had the great idea within making teenagers actually voice them. But the best idea they actually had was framing this movie as a coming-of-age story. That is the moment that really took me away and took me back to an area that I did not expect to fall in love with so much. And that's what got me emotional about this. The more I think about this movie, the more I love it. I think this is the best Ninja Turtles movie. I said that in my review, and I stand by that on this ranking. I've only seen the film once, and usually I try to see it again before I do these rankings, but it's one of those films that you just keep thinking about it, and you're like, that is so damn good. And it's so much fun. Now, I will say, it's not perfect. I wish the film was a little bit longer. I also don't fully agree on some of the stuff that they did with the mutants, and since this is a ranking, I am going to do a tad bit of a spoiler since the film is now out. I didn't love what they did with Bebop and Rocksteady. I think it was kind of all the mutants. I think a lot of them were wasted personally, but like specifically them, which I'm pretty big fans of. They didn't do anything, and by like the ending, like where you see they go, I'm like, I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I digress. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem is the best Ninja Turtles film now. It's a brand new iteration that kind of mixes what I loved from every one of the other versions, but finally places them into like real life teenagers. Like they are teenagers. And I know there's an argument being made out that maybe they're like kind of more like kids. Well, yeah, but teenagers are kids. Like when you look at like teenagers just growing into it, this is exactly what they are. This is just the version that I wanted. I cannot wait for the show that Paramount Plus will be doing, and I can't wait for the direct sequel to this. Please go support this movie. Please revisit and share your ranking of the Ninja Turtles movies. And if I missed any of the ones that were like not theatrical, let me know. Maybe I can go definitely check it out on my own time. But thank you so much again, guys, for watching this. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, until next time, stay classy.